Hey, read through the word. Today is September 6th, and today's lesson is called A Star Still Shines. We'll talk about what that means in a minute. I have a couple of other names I almost gave it, but I wasn't quite sure. So here we call it that. It gives a starting point, and I explain what it means and why we're doing it. So our verses today come from 2 Kings 25, 27 through 30. And it says, in the 37th year of the exile of King Jehoiachin of Judah, Evil-merodach ascended to the Babylonian throne. He was kind to Jehoiachin and released him from prison on April 2nd of that year. He spoke kindly to Jehoiachin, gave him a higher place than all the other exiled kings in Babylon. He supplied Jehoiachin with new clothes to replace his prison garb and allowed him to dine in the king's presence for the rest of his life. So the king gave him a regular food allowance as long as he lived. And then that's the end of the book. That's the end of 2 Kings. So I want us to look at what all's going on here, some names and things that are going on, and I want us to look at this like it's a screenplay. Just bear with me for a minute. It could be a TV screenplay, it could be a movie screenplay. I want you to think about what we're going through with the action of everything that's happened in the book of 2 Kings and all that we've seen the prophets. So as we're reading chronologically, as we see what's happening, we've got thing after thing after all of these things. Remember, the prophets are telling us everything's happening, and then everything finally does end. The end of Jerusalem, the destruction of the temple, everything gone and gone. Lamentations has been written. Here we are at the end. Now, imagine if you're seeing this as a screenplay and you're watching all of these things happen. And then here our camera comes in and it shows us a city full of destruction. Everything gone. The temple leveled, the walls destroyed. Everyone that's left is destitute. There are no crops in the fields because all the fields have been burned. And then maybe they'll give us another shot of people over in Babylon in exile, and how they've been torn from their land. They've been torn from the presence of their God in his temple. And all of these things happen, and you're like, whoa, what is this? Wait, what kind of mess is this? What kind of way is this to end a story? And then all of a sudden you get another shot. Or maybe this is the end credit scene. You know, that's the popular thing to do now in the movies. You know, it used to be as soon as the credits started rolling, you hightailed it out of the movie theater. In days where we went to movie theaters. But now you can't do that. When we go to movies with my kids are always expecting there's an end credit scene. There's going to be a scene in the credit that's going to get you ready for the next thing. But just as you think all hope is lost, and then the credits start rolling, and then all of a sudden there starts a black screen. And it zooms back out, and all of a sudden we see either a star shining in a black sky or a small flame in the middle of darkness. And all of a sudden we see, and that's where we pick up our story. So what we're seeing is this is the end credit scene to the book of 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles. This is the end credits. Just when you think the story's done, doom and gloom, and you think, where can we go from here? This does not look good for our people. What's going to happen? And that's what this is. So, what we have right here is, depending on translations, because of how the names were said, you'll get the name said either Amal-Marduk or Evil-merodach. Which is to use the name of Marduk, they're one of the gods of those times, ascended to the Babylonian throne in the 37th year to the exile of King Jehoiachin. So this king is the son of Nebuchadnezzar. So this guy that's on the throne now is the son of Nebuchadnezzar. And he gets on the throne. And from what all you read, it could be some kind of political intrigue, some kind of game he's playing, that all of a sudden, out of all the kings that he's exiled from all over, where that Babylon has captured, he picks Jehoiachin to set free and bring to sit at his table, where he is treated better and differently than anybody else. And, you know, it sort of is odd to us as to what's going on. So, let's remember who Jehoiachin is. Now, well, remember when we got to those last 5 kings that are sort of like 3 months here, 11 months here, all of those. He's that king. He's one of those kings, and I'm going to show you his name in a couple of other places. And we know this is one of those fascinating things about archaeology. Archaeology has given us a record of Jehoiachin receiving portions of oil in archaeological records that show this. So if you've got a study Bible, probably in your notes of your study Bible, it will tell you that with this, that, you know, even that archaeology is showing his name in the records there. And so what we see is he is treated differently. He has ration given to him. He's treated totally different. Now, what we know of Jehoiachin is he was one of the last kings in the kingdom of Judah who sat on the throne. Remember the throne that had been promised in 2 Samuel chapter 7 to David, that someone from his family of his descendants would sit on the throne. And that we needed to follow that line for someone to lay claim to the throne later, which we talked about the other week when we looked in Matthew, and we're going to look there again today. But as an heir of God's promise to David, Jehoiachin had been placed upon the throne. Well, as the king, remember, we want a king to fight for us. Well, the king who fights for us also gets disciplined for them. And because he was the king during this time, he is punished for Israel's rebellion. Now, Lamentations talks about how that works. So, we're going to Lamentations, if I can get there. It's hiding in my Bible. There it is. Lamentations 4:20 says this. The breath of our nostrils. Well, you should pick up a couple verses back, but here's the verse. 4:20, it says, the breath of our nostrils, the Lord's anointed, was captured in their pits, of whom we said, under his shadow we shall live among the nations. So, Jerusalem's king was the very breath of the nostrils, so they did depend on him. So, under whatever happened to the king is what happened to the people. And so that's what Lamentations is talking about, is this. Now, what happened is then, so here's Jehoiachin. He'd been taken from the palace and from his throne as the king in the line of David and taken into captivity as a prisoner into Babylon. Well, that was a pretty pretty far fall, especially when he was only king for 3 months. But he'd been raised in the palace. His dad was king, his uncle was king, his cousin was king. So all of those, that's what his life was. And then for 37 years, he sits in a prison. And then after 37 years, just like that, he has a new life. He has a new life given to him. And what we see is, so as we get our end credit scene to the 2 Kings, 2 Chronicles. We have this end credit scene that gives us all hope is not lost. Oh, you people of Israel, your hope is not lost. There is someone from the line of David who is still alive. There's hope for your throne. There's hope for you yet. Your story is not done. So we see that what happened is God had brought judgment to his people, and he promised restoration. And so if you're left with the end of the story being doom and gloom and everything, destruction of the temple, everybody carted off, everybody's in prison, we forget that God had, back here in our brain, we forget God's not done. God's made promises of restoration. God's given them a promise for a future. He's given them the promise, and we get this one little glimpse that he's not done. Just you wait. Here's King Jehoiachin. He's not gone. And then we get to see, we're like, so end credit is, the king is still alive. Wonder what'll happen next. Matthew tells us. So go to Matthew chapter 1. Matthew chapter 1, verses 11 and 12. I hope you recognize some names there. Because what you'll pick up in the book of Ezra is you'll pick up with the name of Shealtiel, who is the descendant of Jeconiah. So the story's not done. And we're going to see those names again in the lineage of Jesus. God's not done with us yet. We still have more to the story. We'll see you next time on Read Through the Word.